Hi, baddies. Welcome back to another episode of Tara's Baddies Club. This episode is unique, especially for me, especially coming from a conservative family. It is unique because I don't usually talk a lot about sex on my podcast. And today I have a sex therapist, Dr. Kate. She's going to come on and talk about her new book. And also, we're going to talk about trauma and sex and just tips, advice, some of my personal stuff, and we're going to get into it. So if you are conservative, very conservative, just not open to sex, you're maybe just like, maybe you're my mom's friend, maybe you're my dad's friend, maybe this isn't the episode for you. But if you are open and supportive and also just, wanting to learn more, check out this episode, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So let's get into this episode. Welcome back to another episode of Tara's Baddies Club. I am with Dr. Kate. Do you also use your last name too, or do you just go by Dr. Kate sometimes?
You can just call me Dr. Kate, it's fine, but my full name is Dr. Kate Balestrieri.
Okay, perfect. Well, welcome, Dr. Kate. I'm so excited to have you today. For those that don't know you, can you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Of course, yeah. I'm a licensed psychologist, certified sex therapist, and I own a group therapy practice with providers all across the country called Modern Intimacy. And I recently wrote a book called What Happened to My Sex Life. And there's probably more I could share, but I'll stop there.
That is lovely. Well, I think it's amazing that you do this work, especially being in LA, because I feel like in LA you get a lot of different types.
I think that's true everywhere, but definitely every city has its own vibe, right? And draws different traits from different peoples. And the community builds around industry and different traits. Yeah.
Okay. And what are some of the clients that mostly come to you?
Oh gosh, my practice is pretty diverse. I've been doing this work for so long, so I would say I work with everyone from all different walks of life and all different backgrounds. And some of the things that people are coming to see me or other providers in my practice for range a diverse number of topics, things like desire discrepancy, healing after sexual trauma, addressing problematic or out of control sexual behavior, erectile dysfunction, early ejaculation, pain during penetration, lots of different things.
Okay. Well, I think it's really interesting that you work with trauma, and then we'll get into your book later about, kind of how to get back on track with your sex life. Is that mostly what it's about?
Yeah, so What Happened to My Sex Life is a book it's written for people who have lost the connection that they once had with their desire. So and maybe they're feeling like sex isn't something that they think about as often as they used to. Maybe they want to have sex, but something's not clicking for them. And this book is really a summation of some of the more common themes that I see when people do feel disconnected from their.
Okay. Well, we'll get more into that later, but I'm really interested into the trauma aspect of your practice because I feel like trauma and sex go so hand in hand.
They can, unfortunately. Yeah. I mean, the numbers are pretty staggering, the number of people who have experienced any kind of sexual trauma, but really any kind of trauma can influence our sex lives.
Yes. Okay, so I was a person, I liked it rough. I liked to be honestly choked to the point where I would like pass out actually. And now I don't like that.
Okay.
And I had a feeling it had something to do also with my trauma. Do you see a lot of people kind of having sex more rough or more, I don't know, more,
More rich.
what's the, yes. Do you see a lot of people doing that have experienced trauma?
That's such a good question. And I think it's important just to maybe back up a little bit because kink and people's desire sexually can come from early life experiences, but they don't always. And just because
Okay.
someone likes rough sex or likes things that might involve more risk, it doesn't necessarily mean that desire is coming from a place of trauma, even if they've had trauma in the past, right? So I would say the short answer is sometimes, right, people's trauma can inform their arousal template, their erotic orientation, but not always. And even if it does come from a place of trauma, I would say it doesn't have to mean that it's unhealthy for someone too. For a lot of folks, sex is a place where they play with empowerment. And when we're looking at the healing continuum, empowerment is really important. So for those people who do have something in their their erotic orientation that feels similar to a traumatic experience they may have had, the questions that I would ask them to understand, is this healthy for them or unhealthy for them? And really that's for them to decide, not me or another professional. But the questions I would ask them to think about are you going into this consciously? Are you outlining really clear boundaries for your play? Is everything consensual? Does it feel like something you're consciously saying yes to and that feels empowering to you? Do you experience a lot of shame after, a lot of guilt, a lot of fear? When you're finished with your scene or finished with your play, do you feel, does it set you back in terms of your symptom recovery? Do you experience like a regression of symptoms or high levels of shame? So, I think we have to look at each person individually to get a sense of where does their sexual desire and their erotic orientation come from, and how does that feel for them?
Okay. I think that's so interesting. Also, something that you said about kink. Now I'm curious, what would make a kink come out other than trauma as well?
So many things. So kink is really interesting in the sense that it really just means any kind of sexual play that's sort of different from what's determined to be the quote unquote norm. But kink is really about intimacy. It's about sensation, emotion, connection. It's about play. So what brings it out in us is a desire to play and to experience different sensations or emotions that maybe we're not accessing in different kinds of sex that are non-kinky, or maybe that we're not accessing in our everyday lives. So, you know, if somebody has, well, for example, a kink around being asphyxiated or strangled, right? Sometimes that's about the desire to have the endorphins running through the body that come with that kind of play. Now, that is a very risky kind of play because any kind of deprivation of oxygen to the brain can have long-lasting, if not permanent, effects. So it's if you're going to practice that, I would say be very cautious and judicious, and less is more probably, but I'm not recommending anyone do it, period, because it can be so risky. But lots of people enjoy it. And so, like, does that come from trauma? Maybe. Or maybe it's about the sensation that they get to experience in their body when there's pressure on their body, for example, or with the deprivation of oxygen.
Okay, I think, yeah, all this is so interesting. And I have so many questions. And I think it's funny because also Lenora came on my podcast, told a story about how she went on a first date with this guy and he had a kink fetish about balloons.
An inflation fetish?
Yes. And she shared that, and she wasn't matching with him with
Mhm.
that vibe, but I'm sure there will be someone else that would match with him.
Yeah.
And for me, especially, I think that the choking had to do from my childhood trauma from
Mm.
seeing it happen to my mother.
Mm. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to your mom and that you witnessed it.
Thank you. But it's really interesting how that became the baseline of how I thought I should be treated.
Mm.
And with doing so much work on myself now, I feel kind of vanilla in sex.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that your journey is so valid, right? And other people may do a lot of healing from the trauma that they've experienced and still find that they are erotically charged around some things, and that can be a place that brings up a lot of confusion for people, right? But there isn't a right or a wrong way to heal. I just want to make that clear.
Now, when someone comes to you, say, with a problem like I did, or just something that they need to work through, where do you start at with their journey?
Yeah, the same place I would say other therapists and psychologists start. I want to understand my client holistically. So, what's been happening in their life from their early years up to present? to help me get a sense of how did they become who they are? How did they come to form the views that they have about themselves, about the world, about other people? And from that foundation, I can start to get a better sense of what their goals are and how we meet those goals.
Okay. And then would it be like an hour session with you? And now I'm like doing the consult so no one else
I
has
would
to.
not pay for this advertising. Yeah, I mean, sessions are typically 50-minute hours, but some people like to have double sessions or even 3-hour sessions so they can front load some of the tougher work a little bit faster in the process, especially couples.
Okay. And do you have people do work on themselves before they do work with their partner?
I think it depends on what the goal is and what each person has the resources for. So if folks are coming in and it's really clear to me that what's going on in a partnership is due to maybe a deficiency of skills in one partner, I would recommend that that partner seek individual therapy, maybe at the same time as their couples therapy, or maybe separately, and then we can resume when they're complete, so that they can go and address the things that might be getting in the way of the couple making progress together. But I don't think you need to heal yourself before you can be in relationship. I think we do a lot of healing on our own, but we really do a lot of healing in relationship too. As I think again, it depends on the couple and sort of what they each need as individuals within that couple system.
Okay. Is there any couples that come to you that you kind of say these couples are not going to make it, or you see something that has shown you a pattern that these couples aren't going to make it?
I mean, I might have some hypotheses, but it's not up to me to decide that. So, couples therapists are not really supposed to tell people they should or shouldn't stay together. That's for partners to decide on their own. But when I see things going on in a coupleship that probably means that isn't sustainable for the health of the relationship, I will highlight that it's not sustainable. And what the couple does with that is up to them, right? They might decide to change the behavior that one or both of them are exhibiting so that they can have a more sustainable process together. Or they might say, you know what, this is sort of an immovable part of me and I'm not interested in making those changes. So maybe this isn't the right relationship for me.
There is so many things that don't really work in relationships. And do some people just not match sexually?
Yeah. So, I mean, sex is a really interesting landscape, right? So, we can want different things sexually and still be really compatible in the way that we love and the way that we care for one another. I don't mean to reduce sex to food, but if you have a relationship with someone and you like one type of cuisine and they like another type of cuisine, you're going to have to find out how to compromise, right? You might have to go to restaurants that are like your partner's kind of cuisine, and they're going to come to restaurants that are like yours. And so couples with really mismatched sexual interests can find middle ground. And when they can't, they can work together collaboratively to come up with other solutions.
Okay. And if you're not matching sexually, what are some things you can kind of say to your partner to kind of get do you have a dog?
Yeah, sorry.
No worries. We love dogs. I love dogs here. So I was like, and now I'm kind of curious what kind, and I love to just see them on the camera.
She probably won't come in here when I'm talking, but I can show you a picture. But you were here.
So cute. Do you get her dyed?
I do.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. I used to be a dog groomer, but now I'm getting off topic.
I know I could totally detour with you about dogs, but you were asking me what were you asking me about, like what couples can do?
What are some things you can kind of communicate to couples to get the ball rolling on changing or adapting your sexual life?
Well, I think one of the things that is really important is to consider how you're showing up and talking about this with your partner. It's completely normal. I don't even like the word normal, but it's completely to be expected that over our lifespans, different things will become interesting to us, or we might, just as you mentioned, right? Something might be really sexually exciting for a while, and then something changes in who you are and what you know about yourself or how you see things, and maybe you're not as interested in something you used to be. But the same is true in reverse, right? You might watch a movie and see something really sexy and be like, well, wait a minute. I never saw that before. That's kind of interesting. I've never really given that a fair consideration. So I think, like, how open-minded are you, and are you willing to be vulnerable with yourself first and with your partner to say, hey, I'm kind of interested in thinking about some new fantasies. Can we start that conversation? And I would say, like, set yourselves up for success here. And what I mean by that is, don't have this conversation for the first time during sex, and don't have this conversation when you're like rushing around trying to get ready for work, or you're right before bed or something. Like, set a time where you actually both have the bandwidth and the space to be intentional about what you could be open to exploring. The other thing that's really important is that when you're taking that risk to be vulnerable and to tell your partner something that you want to try or you want to think about together, understand that this is the first time they might be hearing about it. And because we've put so much meaning on sex culturally, often it can create a lot of fear in partners. Like, they might think they're not enough, or they might think that the relationship is at risk if they're not interested in participating in this. So it can activate a lot of fears for folks. So it is really important to be sensitive, to give each other time and space to process information, to expect questions, and maybe to proactively share what about the fantasy feels exciting to you, so that if your partner's not exactly down for what you are interested in, maybe if they understand what are you trying to feel through that fantasy, you can find other ways of getting there, which can feel a lot more empowering.
Okay. I feel like the things I'm into more so are like, let's have a baby together kind of vibe. It's changed so drastically because
Yeah.
I feel like also there's different phases of life that you go
Mhm.
through. And when you feel safe with a partner, it just is all the difference.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And okay, so say you are a guy and you just don't know what to do. Where would you start to please a woman or just start to get comfortable with a woman?
Such a big question, such a good
Sorry.
question. No, don't be sorry. It's a good question. I think there's a few things that I might invite men to think about. One, try to get out of your head, right? And that's really hard if you are anxious, or you're trying so hard to please a partner that you're actually inadvertently making it about you, right? So I would say, can you get out of your head and get more into your body so that you can really sit with and the presence of what you're feeling and what you're experiencing together? Because sex isn't something that you do to someone, and it's not something that someone gives to you, right? Sex with a partner is a co-created experience of pleasure. So what does that mean? It means, think about how your partner might be experiencing your touch. Check in with them, because no group of people are monolithic, right? And what you might be doing with one partner might give them so much pleasure, they might be like screaming with orgasms over and over again. And if you do the exact same thing with another partner, they might not react at all, because we all have different variations in our anatomy. We have different variations in what is erogenous, and what feels good and what feels exciting. We have different fantasies. So I think the most important thing is to be present with the body, be present in your own and with your partner's body, and check in with them a lot, Get curious about what they like. And that kind of attunement is really, really exciting for a lot of folks.
Okay. And do you also agree that you should be comfortable with yourself before you go into something sexually?
I don't know what that means. I think there are so many ways we could be comfortable or uncomfortable with ourselves. So can you say more?
Yeah, so I was reading another book and they were basically saying how you should pleasure yourself like at least once a week.
Mm.
And do you agree with doing that in order to be more, I don't know, just comfortable with having sex?
Well, I don't like to should or shouldn't people around sexuality. Definitely engaging in solo sex can give you a lot more information about your own body and what you like and what turns you on. It can foster a lot of comfort with your own sort of sexual arousal process, which can then lend itself well to your partnered sexual experiences. But I don't generally like to prescribe that people do or do not engage in solo sex. It's really individual, and it can be a great learning strategy. It can be great at increasing comfort, but also I think when you're with a partner, that's a really different psychological and physiological process. At some point, right, you've got to be with your partner, and you might have anxiety or some discomfort with a partner that you don't have when you're by yourself, because now there's another human in the room. So being with your partner more and learning to move through the anxiety with them is a great strategy as well.
Okay. Okay. Now, we also asked about the boys. So, is there anything girls should be doing to help please their partner in a way? Do they need to like ask more questions, or is there anything that you see kind of girls do that guys don't?
Well, let's see. One of the things that I see with heterosexual couples is that more often than not, yeah, I'll say more often than not, women are conditioned to put their partner's pleasure above their own. And that often takes a pretty gnarly toll on their own pleasure. And so they're not communicating what they want and what they need out of fear, out of shame, or because they don't really know, and or because their partner's not super invested in learning about what they want, right? So I think sometimes there can be these very gendered ways that people are sexual that they are not really conscious of. So I would say, regardless of your gender and sexual orientation, really notice what you're feeling in your body. Lean into that awareness of what sensations you're sitting with. Are you feeling any pain? Is there pleasure? Does it feel good? Do you want this to continue? Do you feel safe enough to communicate that to your partner? And if you don't, is there a way that you can build that safety and trust with that person? If not, I might be curious about kind of why you're in that relationship, outside of what might be an abusive context, of course, where there's volition. I would be really curious about kind of why you're staying. But yeah, I would say the best thing you can do for your sex life is be an advocate for both your pleasure and your partner's pleasure, while not taking on the responsibility of your partner's pleasure, right? We are all responsible for our own orgasms. But in partnered play, it's really important that all partners are paying attention to the reciprocity of pleasure, right? And making sure that each person gets satisfaction.
Yeah. I'm kind of the person that I'm like, I like for us to just come at the same time because that means we both got pleasure.
Yeah, that is definitely romantic. It's also really hard to accomplish for a lot of couples. So I think, for the people who can do it, great. And if you can't, then you've got to work together to figure out how do you make sure everybody's pleasure needs get met.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that in this society, there is such a big aspect on the male
Mm,
getting off, the male getting pleasure, and we see so much in even porn and adult films that it's all about the guy banging it out on the girl.
yeah, kind of using her body as a masturbation tool.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, definitely the porn industry has centered the male gaze and the male experience. But there are some really great female and feminist porn creators that have taken that narrative back, and they've really centered female pleasure, or they've created more of an egalitarian picture of pleasure, which is great. But yeah, we live in a patriarchy, so men's needs get centered and prioritized, usually very unconsciously by people of all genders. And when you start recognizing that within yourself or within your partnership, you can start to speak to it and start to make some changes so that, again, pleasure is decentered and more reciprocal.
Yes. Do you see any problems with this, like the porn industry, other than just like the male centered being male centered?
Mhm. Yeah, of course. Certainly would be remiss to overlook the exploitation that has happened within the porn industry in many different forms and iterations. Right, actors and actresses are usually very underpaid. Historically, there were not great protocols in place for STI testing and safer sex practices. That has changed, although I don't know what the current data is on compliance. And then of course, like with some websites where you can upload pornography, there's been a lot of non-consensual and child sexual abuse material uploaded. The porn industry has been irresponsible historically, and I think there are folks within it who are trying to do a lot better, and there are some folks who will continue to exploit the loopholes that are there that they can find. But the why behind that question is the important part. And that's because we live in a culture where sexuality is still such a taboo topic. So wherever there is taboo, there will be blurring the boundaries, and that's part of the arousal for them. So getting away with something they're not supposed to get away with is really important. So the more we make sex this negative, scary thing that only should exist in these certain narrow permissions, we're actually promoting rape culture and all sorts of problems in the industries, because then it makes it harder for those things to be safely discussed and properly regulated and addressed. And that's a big part of the dominator culture that we live in, right? That
Yeah.
exploitation.
I've met so many women that have told their stories to me about them being sexually trafficked in the porn industry, and it makes me so sad. Is there any websites out there that you would recommend for people to check out that are kind of safe in a sense with that?
Yeah, I really like Erica Lust's work. She does great work, and she's very, very committed to ethical porn creation. But definitely Erica Lust. And then you can Google other feminist and ethical porn content creators. They do exist. But the other thing you can do is go right to the content creators on OnlyFans or who have private pages, and you can pay for content. And when you're doing that, you're supporting those content creators directly. And that's a better way to make sure that they are appropriately compensated for work that is done on their terms.
Okay, because I know some of the big ones, Pornhub and Brazzers, those are the ones to not be safe, even if they charge, right?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be hesitant not to make blanket statements because I don't know the current status of like what work these companies have or have not done to create a more ethical landscape. I know a few years ago, Pornhub got into a lot of trouble with some non-consensual material involving minors and also trafficked persons, and they have cleaned a lot of that out of their
Okay.
platform. But I don't know to what degree, and I don't know what their diligence levels are right now in terms of protecting people and the content that gets posted.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I haven't really like checked and snooped it out, but I'm like, I've heard about the sexual trafficking on Pornhub. So I told all my friends, I'm like, don't watch that.
Yeah, I think, paying content creators directly or really aligning yourself with producers and production teams that do declare that they are making ethical or feminist porn content is really important, because then there's never a guarantee, but there's more of a transparency typically, and you can tell that people are being a lot more thoughtful about how the work is created and how it affects the content creators themselves.
Okay. Would you ever recommend someone to bring in toys or just experiment with toys?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
If they're interested in toys, yeah, I would say toys can be a huge ally in the bedroom. They can really amplify partners play together. And if you're engaging solo, absolutely.
Okay. Is there any websites you would recommend for that? Because I know there's also websites that are more male based and more feminine. I can't talk right now. Feminine based.
Uh-huh. You're asking for some brand recommendations?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Sure. I tend to like the brand Lilo. They do a really great job of being really inclusive and sex positive. Also, Dame products are great. It depends on what you're looking for. Love Ends is really awesome if you like sex tech.
Okay.
If you want a sex toy that can connect with an app and you can play long distance with people, or remote by yourself, which is really cool. So yeah, there's lots of different brands out there that are great. I'm sure I'm missing a bunch right now.
I actually collaborated with this brand called Woo More Play,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like coconut oil based. And I like coconut oil based
Mm-hmm.
products
Mm-hmm.
opposed to water-based. It's just, I don't know. I feel more natural with coconut.
Yeah, everyone's bodies respond differently, right? So it's good to find a lube that works for you.
Yes. And then, so getting more into your book, what are some of the main components of your book? I know we touched a little bit on that earlier, and probably some of the things that are in your book too.
Yeah. The book is broken into three parts. The first part addresses more intrinsic factors. So, what's going on with me, right? Am I angry? Am I having a hard time healing? Am I burnt out? Am I broken, right? All of these questions that people might be asking themselves to help them figure out why their relationship with desire has changed. And the second part of the book is called What's Going On in My Relationships, right? And that really helps people explore the dynamics that they're having in partnership and to see if that could be influencing their lower desire. So, topics in that section are things like, are we really compatible? Am I a partner or a parent? Looking at emotional labor disparities. So those are just a couple of examples. And then the last section is, what do I do about it, right? What can I do about it? And in that section, I walk readers through some really tangible ideas on how to start reconnecting with their body again, reconnecting with pleasure, identifying and naming their boundaries and their yeses and their nos, and really put into practice a plan that feels sustainable for them.
Okay, beautiful. And so we do a little segment for the Patreon where we just go on a little bit more. But for the people that are dropping off here, where can we find you on social media? Where can we find your book?
Yeah, thank you. You can find me on my website, modernintimacy.com. The book is on there as well, but you can also find me on social, on TikTok, Threads, and Instagram at Dr. Kate Balestrieri, and on YouTube at Modern Intimacy. And then I have a podcast also called Get Naked with Dr. Kate, so folks can check that out if they're interested.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, and we'll continue to the Patreon. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Tara's Baddies Club with Dr. Kate. It was so exciting to talk to her. I hope you guys got to learn a little bit, got to learn how to amp up your sex life maybe a little bit, or just be more connected to it. And I encourage everyone to check out her book. And until next time, I am Tara Newell, and thank you for tuning in.